Hello and welcome back to CamBro Conversations. Today's conversation, I'm delighted to be joined by Zuby. Zuby is a rapper, author, coach, podcaster, and a computer science graduate from Oxford. Zuby, welcome to the podcast.
How's it going, Colin? Happy to be here.
Delighted to have you, Zuby. And I've listed off some headlines there of all the different things that you do and all the different areas that you apply yourself in. But I'd love to understand more about what was your background like to put the man in front of us that we have now. Like, what happened to shape Zuby that we see in 2022?
Yeah, sure thing. So probably best to explain where I am from. It's a question I get asked, must be hundreds of thousands of times at this point. Where are you from? Doesn't matter what country I'm in. People hear my voice, my accent, just me talking or my music or whatever. And they always ask that. So I was born in the UK, in England specifically. I grew up primarily in Saudi Arabia. My family background is originally from Nigeria. And when I was in Saudi Arabia, I went to an international school. So I was actually in the American schooling system from kindergarten up until fifth grade, up until the age of about 11. And then I went to boarding school in the UK at the age of 11. I was there for 7 years, first of all in Surrey and then in Bristol. I did really well in school. I got into Oxford University, went there when I was 18 years old, studied computer science, graduated when I was 20. And that is also where I started my music career. So I wrote and released my first album when I was in my second year of university. So that's how the music career kicked off. And then fast forwarding a bit, in 2011, I left my corporate job. I was a management consultant for 3 years. And I left that job in November 2011 to go become a full-time musician. So for over a decade now, I have been self-employed through my music, and I've added additional strings to the bow over time. I started my podcast, Real Talk with Zuby, in 2019, wrote and released my first book, Strong Advice, also in 2019. That was a huge transitional year. That was when things really started to blow up and take off for me, started to gain hundreds of thousands of followers, got on big shows like Joe Rogan, The Rubin Report, Tucker Carlson, BBC News, Sky News, all these different platforms. And things have been growing and snowballing, honestly, ever since then.
Yeah, it's been an incredible watch because I first became aware of you when you were interviewed by friend of the show, Chris Williamson, on Modern Wisdom in 2019. And there was a lot going on for you at that point. And I'm sure we'll touch on one of the big things that happened at that point that led to some of you going viral. But I wonder how much of your diverse background and the different things you've experienced and the things you turn your hand to shapes your ability to speak so forthrightly on so many different topics as well. Because I think when it comes to confidence, we have to have competence in different areas. And it seems that you have that. And I suppose it maybe instills a level of belief in you to speak forthrightly on such a range of topics as you do.
I think so. And look, some of it is, people always ask questions about nature versus nurture. Is it, somebody's personality, or is it their environment, or this? The honest truth is that it's both, obviously, with pretty much everything, right? We all know that there are environmental factors around us and there are influences. We also know that we all have a unique genetic makeup and DNA, which we can't change. We all have a different personality. We are a combination of stuff from our parents as well as our ancestors we never even knew, and then we get our own little twist on it, so that every single human being in the world is different. Every single person in this world is different genetically, and then they also have a different range of experiences and backgrounds. You don't choose where you're born, when you're born, who you're born to. Lots of things are out of our control. So I think in my case, I actually get asked that question quite a bit, and I certainly have a unique personality type. I've done quite a few personality tests and things like that, and I'm quite extreme on several personality traits, which play into the way I am, I think. So I'm extremely low in neuroticism, which is sensitivity to negative emotion, meaning that I just deal with negative emotion way better than most people, and I'm not very sensitive to it. I'm completely immune to depression and anxiety and all that stuff. Like I don't really even know what it feels like. I don't really know what it means because I'm not wired that way. I'm also extremely assertive. I'm like in the top 4% of the population in assertiveness. I'm also extremely high in intellect, which means I'm very interested in ideas and concepts and trying to figure things out. Anyone who listens to me on any podcast or follows me on Twitter or whatever, I'm constantly thinking out loud. I've actually made quite a name for myself for essentially just sharing what I am thinking with the public. Like my brain is just running all the time. I do it in my music, right? When I'm rapping, I'm writing a song, like boom, I'm just sharing my thoughts, my ideas, my opinions. You know, I see this, I see that. Here's what I think. I do the same on Twitter. I do the same on podcasts. And also, so it's a combination thing. So I have that level of confidence, and I'm very confident with what I do. I also, and this may surprise some people because I'm not necessarily known for my modesty. I don't think I'm modest, but I do think I'm a humble person in that I don't have this assumption that I'm above everyone and I can't learn from everyone. And I'm also willing to be wrong. I'm even willing to be wrong publicly, which a lot of people are not. So when I'm putting my thoughts and my ideas out there, I think some people misconstrue it as like, oh, he thinks he knows everything. Or it's like, no, I'm doing this mental exercise. I'm going on this journey with you right now over the course of this podcast, and I'm going to be throwing ideas out there, and I'm going to be putting opinions out there. And some of them I've thought about deeply, and I'm like, okay, I think I've got this well formulated. Other things, it's like, well, I don't know. Okay, here's an idea. Let me put this to you. What do you think of this, Colin? And then we can bounce that off each other. So I'm doing this all the time, every single day, hours a day. I'm doing that, and I've been doing that for a long period of time without people knowing. So by this time people discover me in 2019 or 2020 or 2021, 2022, and they see what I'm doing, and they're like, whoa, okay, this guy's doing something unique and interesting. I've actually had a lot of practice. I've interacted with millions of people online, hundreds of thousands in real life. A key part of my story that people also don't know is that for that whole time period from when I released my first album back in the mid 2000s up until about 2018, I spent a huge amount of time just traveling around the UK, standing out on the street, selling my CDs to people. And then eventually I moved into the shopping mall. So I've been into every single city in the UK pretty much, multiple times, out there on the street, talking to people face to face, introducing myself to people, playing them my music. So I've had a stupid number of human interactions, like a ridiculous number. Old people, young people, men, women, boys, girls, whatever, groups, individuals. I speak to everybody. Online, I do the same thing. I have an audience globally. I have followers in every single country in the world pretty much. And every day, you see, I'm conversing with people. I'm talking to people, sharing ideas, agree, disagree. People are fighting me. I'm defending myself. I'm putting this idea, I'm putting that out there. And some people are like, whoa, this is crazy. But for me, number one, I enjoy it, but also every day I become a little bit smarter. I become a little bit better. Just like if you go to the gym and you train, you do it for a long period of time. You know, people look at you after a decade of training and, whoa, look at how strong this guy is. Like, this guy's in great shape. It's like, yeah, well, I've been doing it almost every day for such a long period of time.
There's a huge parallel to be between you talking about that gym analogy there, but also the fact that your level of intellect and your level of experience through all these hundreds of thousands of conversations and different exposures you've had, of course, it positions you well to articulate your thoughts and put them out into the world quite quickly, as well as the fact you've obviously caveated that with the fact that sometimes it's not as well thought through and you really are just speaking out what's going on inside your head. And of course, nowadays that is deemed a little bit more of a risk. And that's why I think you stand out more, because I don't think you'll maybe like this term, but your bravery to be so forthright in your speech is a little bit unique. And one of the terms that isn't included in your bio, rapper, author, podcaster, coach, is social commentator. And I think a lot of people in the last couple of years would have associated that term with you, Zuby, because of your willingness and ability to articulate yourself very clearly and succinctly and regularly on such big topics.
Yeah, sure. Well, the thing is, as I said before, I'm extremely intellectually curious. So I think that, again, this is something that's a personality trait. Some people are happy to go around the world and not really spend much time thinking about why things are the way they are and what things really mean. But I'm so interested in that. I mean, you know, there's some people who think that stuff is boring. right? Philosophy, boring. Religion, boring. Politics, boring. Social issues, cultural issues, boring, right? They just want to talk about football and Love Island and what's happening on TV and films and whatever. And I'm not even saying that as a diss. In some ways, I wish I could be like that in certain ways. But I'm just interested in deep stuff. I'm interested in human beings. Why is the world the way it is? Why is society like this? I grew up in Saudi Arabia. Right now, as we record this, I'm in Turkey. Tomorrow, I will be in Dubai. Before that, I was in the UK. I spent time in the US. I've been to I think 38 different countries so far. You know, why is Saudi Arabia the way it is? Why is England the way it is? Why is America the way it is? How come the west coast of America versus the south of America, same country, it's very different. Scotland and England, they have differences. You know, why? All of that is interesting to me. And to understand that, you have to look into human dynamics. You have to look into politics, religion, history, philosophy. You have to look into all of these things. And so to me, that's infinitely fascinating. Even just trying to understand yourself. Why do you're asking me some of these questions and I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, why am I like that? Why am I so forthright in my opinions? Like, why do I have that and other people don't, right? So I'm constantly just trying to understand the world around me and the people around me. And also I'm trying to get to the truth or some semblance of it. You know, we live in this age, there's so much information out there, so much information, so much of it is conflicting, so much stuff seems hypocritical. This side says this, that side says that. The media says this one day, 6 weeks later, they're saying this, which seems to contradict it. I'm just like, what is the truth? I'm trying to make sense of it all. I'm trying to understand what is going on, who's telling the truth, who's being deceptive, what's the bias here, what's the bias there. And then I'm also putting my own thoughts and ideas out there, and I welcome them to be criticized, challenged, agreed with. Let's have these conversations. And I know that by me doing that as well, I think something valuable I do is I didn't set out to do this, but I've noticed that I've created like a forum essentially where people can have these discussions. So sometimes I like to just put an idea out there. Maybe I know it might be a little bit controversial or a little bit polarizing, but it's like, okay, let's put that out there. And now all these thousands of people who follow me, we can now all chat and discuss, and hopefully, we can all take something away from it. Just like people will listen to this podcast. Really, right now it's just us talking, but other people can listen in on this conversation, and hopefully they can take something away from it.
How much of your ability to stand up to negativity and not be challenged by it enables you to be so forthright? Because I think when we think of Twitter, which is probably your largest platform, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are so well known on there, and so often you reach other corners of Twitter that maybe aren't your tribe. And of course they respond to that accordingly. But your ability to stay steadfast, which would be a term that I would use to the course, while also, of course, acknowledging if they come at you with something that's reasoned, you will enter into discussion. But quite often Twitter doesn't really allow for that, does it? But you seem to have this deadly combination of personality traits and experiences, which enables you to take on board the worst of that platform and kind of ride out the storm towards greater growth, or at least continued production of content.
So this is a real combination of personality type and also personal experience. So as I said earlier, I'm way less sensitive to negative emotion than 99% of people. This includes fear, anxiety, doubt, sadness, anger, all of these things. So sometimes I get frustrated. I'm still a human being. I can still get frustrated. I can still get angry. I can still be made to feel sad. But it takes quite a lot for that to happen, right? Compared to most people. So I'm able to use that quite a bit to my advantage, because it means I don't get rattled and I don't get flustered and frustrated when other people are. I mean, just yesterday I was on the news in the UK yesterday, and they wanted me to debate someone on a topic, and he was getting all heated and emotional and angry, and I was just like calm, facts, dropping facts, like just calm. And I think it made him even more frustrated, because it's like, why is this guy not rising to what I want? Why is he not taking the bait? So there's that. And also, again, as I said, I spent the best part of 10 years talking to strangers out on the street. I don't know if you've ever done any direct sales call-in, but nothing will humble you and get you used to rejection more than standing out on the street in a city you're not even from and trying to sell stuff to people. Not even just pass out flyers, make sales, right? I'm there, I have my CDs. I have 30 CDs in my backpack. Before I go home, I want to sell those 30 CDs. You know what British city centers are like. You're just seeing people walking, they're out and about shopping, and I'm there just with my headphones and my CDs, and I'm like, all right, I need to stop these people, and I need to talk to them, introduce myself. So you learn to become very good at communication, very personable. You learn how to approach people. You learn how to deal with pushback. You learn how to handle rejection, because most people say no. Most people say no. If you want to sell 30 CDs, you need to talk to about 200 people, right? That was about the number I noticed. I noticed maybe, between, depending on the day, between 1 in 5 to 1 in 10 people would buy. That was generally, so maybe 1 in 7. So it's like, all right, I want to sell 30 CDs. I got to talk to 200 to 250 people today. Most of them are going to say no. Some of them are going to ignore me. A small handful might even be insulting. Honestly, it was quite rare. People in the UK are quite polite, and I would approach people politely. But you can imagine during a 10-year period, some people say pretty nasty stuff to you, right? Get a real job. Get a real job, mate. Like, why? What are you doing? Stop begging, right? I'm not begging. I'm trying to sell something. But people, you know how people are. Like, you're right. So all that stuff you see on Twitter, it's like I've had that in real life.
Yeah.
Right. I've dealt with that in real life, and it can hurt. Like I've had people say things to me that are pretty hurtful, especially when what you're trying to sell is your own product. As a musician, you very much are your product. Like Zuby is my product. I am me, but I'm also kind of the product. So it's one thing if you're selling
another company,
you're selling pens.
There's detachment, isn't
exactly.
there?
You're selling pens, or you're selling a drink. You're not really emotionally attached to it. But if someone is like, yeah, your music sucks, or you're crap, or you should, like, yeah, sure, you take it on the chin and you learn to roll with it, but it hurts. And I started this when I was in my teens, in my late teenage years. Also, I'm an Oxford University student, so you get people like, oh, who's this Oxford University boy who thinks he's a rapper. I still get that. He's not street, he's not from the hood, he's not gay. It's like, look, I'm just me. I've always been me, and there's always going to be that criticism. But the point of all I'm saying is that the online stuff that you see, compared to so much other stuff I've experienced and developed a thick skin over, at this point, to me, it's like whatever. There's nothing someone can really say or do that's going to rattle me. And most people have never had that. Sometimes I'll get someone who, because I also do social media coaching, right? And so I've had clients, they'll send me something, someone says something mean to them online, and they send it to me on WhatsApp, and they're like, what do I do? Da, da, da. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, is this it? I'm like, man, I get this 300 times a day.
It's perspective, those would be. It's perspective, and yeah. I'm glad you used the term thick skin, because it links to that kind of David Goggins-ism that we've got, where it's about building calluses and exposure over time, or we could relate it to the gym, where it's time under the bar, reps, and kind of accumulating this battle-hardened nature to the stimulus that's coming in, and this stimulus could be online abuse or somebody visibly rejecting you. So no, completely understand that the exposures and experiences you had prepared you very, very well for the current battleground, or the current arena that you're part in.
Let me jump in, Colin, before you ask another question, because this is an important point. When I was selling my CDs on the street, do you know what I remembered when I got home, or when I got home and I even would speak to my mom or a friend or whoever about the day? Do you know the number I remembered? How many CDs I sold. It wasn't how many people rejected me, how many people said no, how many, like it was, oh, cool, I sold 25 CDs. Cool, I sold 40. I sold 12 today. I sold 50 today. That's all it was. You, at the moment, those little negatives sting, but you forget about them. Your brain deletes them very, 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 very quickly. And so it's the same thing online. So it's important that we talk about how to deal with the negative, but you also have to remember that for every one of those negative comments or every negative message or whatever, especially online, there are 20 or 30 positive ones. So for every negative message I get or every negative comment, I'd say there's about 30 that are positive. Every negative DM I get, there's 30 that are positive, maybe 50 that are positive. And so cool, like that's a pretty good ratio. We human beings, for multiple reasons, we are more wired to notice the negative ones. You know, if this video gets a whole bunch of positive comments and then one person writes something nasty, that's the one that sticks in your head. But I think that if you turn your attention towards the positive and you see how you're helping people and impacting people, then you can then get through the negativity much more easily.
Evolutionary, it's largely survivorship, isn't it? Where we highlight the threat because the negative comment is the threat. The negative comment is the bear that will wake up the camp during the night, so you need to be awake. And so we haven't developed quick enough, but it's very interesting that you immediately framed the successes of the day as the thing that was the takeaway. So the number of items, the number of CDs sold, rather than the number of people that blew you off, which of course outnumber, because you're never going to convert people walking down a high street in the volume that you would expect them to. One of the first times that you really came into the UK's knowledge or system was actually on the way back from selling CDs, wasn't it? And it's a story that, I mean, when I first heard it, I was astounded. You actually were talking to my friend Mike Omini about it on his podcast, and I found it astounding that I hadn't heard about this. But I guess maybe I was a little bit younger, where I hadn't maybe seen the headlines. But in 2008, it would have been, you became like an unknown celebrity, so to speak. What happened that day?
What are you referring? Oh, you're referring to the train incident? Is that what you mean? Okay. So I had been out and about in Southampton promoting and selling my music, as I do. This is kind of the first year of, so before I moved into the corporate world, I spent 1 year after university doing my music full time. So this was around 2008 to 2008. And so I went out to Southampton to sell my CDs. I was coming back around 6:30 p.m. Train pulls into Bournemouth Station. I come out the train. I see a bunch of, the firearm police units that they have in the UK, because for any foreign listeners, in the UK, majority of police officers don't carry guns, but this was like the special firearm unit, and they had the dogs and everything. So it looked like, when there's like a heightened terror threat in an airport or something, and you see them around with the dogs and stuff, it looked like that at the station. Anyway, no reason, I just noticed it. I come out the train, actually see one of my friends who's, Zuby, what's up? I shake his hand. We're just like chatting. Next thing I know, I hear, get back, get over. Like, so, everyone's looking around. I look, and the guns are trained on me. I've got about five guns aimed at me, and one of the police officers, someone pushes me backwards and is shouting. I can't remember exactly what they're shouting. Get on the ground, put you like just shouting these commands. And so, I lie down on my front, put my arms up. They handcuff me, tell me I'm under arrest for a Section 1 firearm incident. Obviously, I have no idea what's going on. And I'm marched off into this room where I'm being interrogated, essentially, one of the side rooms in the train station. They're asking me questions about some incident in Basingstoke. I haven't been to Basingstoke that day. They're asking me something about guns, and and they're just asking me all these police questions, right? Like obviously I haven't done anything. So it was a very surreal experience, Colin. Very, very surreal, because it felt like being in a movie or something. I was like, wait, is this a nightmare? Is this, I can't be awake because this doesn't make sense. So the initial moment, like the first minute or two was scary, right? I've got guns aimed at me. I do something wrong, I'm going to die. And then once I was in that room, and again, I think this is a testament to my personality type, right? I was pretty calm because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. So I have no idea what's going on. No idea what's going on. Don't know why they're asking me all these questions or whatever, but I know I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't committed a crime. I wasn't in Basingstoke. I definitely didn't pull a gun on somebody. So I don't know what's going on, but it will get resolved. Also, you know, I said a little prayer, you know, God is going to take care of me. I'll be okay. Anyway, I'm put in the police vehicle, taken to the police station. You know, I'm arrested, right? Like I'm taken to the station, and I'm standing in the station in handcuffs. I think I need to give my name to someone or whatever. And even on the train, on the way to the station, I think by that time, the officers who arrested me knew they had the wrong guy, because they were asking me all these questions. And I'm just answering, I'm answering honestly. I mean, I've still got a few CDs in my backpack and some flyers. They're asking me, what do you know? What have you been doing today? Da, da, da. They're asking me about my background. I was like, yeah, you know, 6 months ago, I graduated from Oxford University. I studied computer science. I'm an independent musician, you know, trying to build up my name, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is not sounding to them like whoever they thought I was. They're kind of like, okay, this isn't sounding. So I think at this point they know, like, oh geez, like
they've got a process to go through though, don't they? They have to take you in.
Yeah, so I can tell that they're not hostile, you know. They're like, oh geez. I can tell I can't remember exactly what he said. One of the officers said something like, this doesn't seem like the type of person who would you know, do whatever, right? So I get to the station. Anyway, I was only in the station for about 10-15 minutes, and then they came out and we're like, we're very, very sorry. Like, we got the wrong person. This was an accidental arrest, whatever. So they offered to drive me back home, but I actually had my car parked at the station. So I just told them to take me to my car. I got back home. I was staying with my parents at the time, told them all about it. You know how parents are, especially moms. She completely freaked out. And then the follow-up was also very weird, because it became this big media story. So it was on the front cover of the Metro in London, you know, the free paper. It was on the front cover 2 days running. So, and then outside the house, there's BBC, ITV, like all the media vans are outside the house. So I can't even really go outside because there's someone who's going to come and shove a microphone in my face. And the whole thing was very weird. It was very surreal. And I was like, I didn't really want the attention, because I'm like, man, you know, it would be wonderful if you all wanted to talk to me about my music, like what I'm actually doing. But it was all about this. And then, you know how people are as well. I think it would have been worse if this happened now, but still people try to put their narratives onto it and tell their own stories. Some people are making it this big race issue. Some people are making it this like terrorism issue, like, because people didn't have the facts. They just saw, okay, this thing happened. How do you see this image? How do you spin this in their head? Some people see it and they're like, this is a racist incident. They did this because he's black. And so that's it. They don't know any of the facts. They just jump to it, right? Other people are like, oh, you know, they thought he had a bomb, you know, da da da. This is before any investigation had taken place. Once that all happened, we found out the truth. But yeah, that's the story in some detail of what happened that day and some of the follow-up from it. So that was a long time ago now. It's not something I really think about, which is why when you said I had to actually recall what you were referring to. But
do you know, Zuby, I wasn't sure if I was going to ask you about it, but I wanted to, because you were discussing your personality traits, and I think that is an example of how calm you can be under extreme duress and pressure. Of course, on a radically different scale to some online abuse or some people threatening to cancel you or whatever else. But having guns pointed at you is obviously the extreme end of that spectrum. But your emotional response and ability to remain in relative control during that period and probably have a coherent conversation with the officers in the car probably expedited and sped up your process versus if you had been a blubbering wreck who hadn't taken it on board.
Yeah. Or aggressive. I could have been killed. Look, you can easily find examples of these situations happening, particularly in America, where this happens and someone gets shot. because they get angry. They try to fight the police officer. They try to take their gun. You're going to get shot, right? So I don't talk about this incident a lot, but when I do, and even when people are talking about things like mistaken police arrests or, these police shootings, whatever, I do tell people, speaking from experience, I'm like, look, all of this sucks. But if you ever happen to find yourself in this situation, 99.9% of people never will. If you ever do, in the moment, just comply. Just comply, right? Comply and see. You can be angry in your head, you can be breathing deeply, your heart will be pumping. Just comply, survive. Don't try to be a hero. Don't try to fight the police officers. If you're in a car, don't try to drive away. Don't, just comply, and then deal with the stuff later down the line. Actually, funnily enough, a couple months ago, I was in Mexico a few months ago, and I got rolled on by the police again. They didn't pull their guns on me this time, but I got stopped by this massive police truck at night, and about 4 guys with machine guns hopped out and were asking me all these questions, stop and frisk, essentially, trying to see if I had drugs or whatever. Again, calm. Speaking to them in both English and Spanish, staying calm. Like, in my brain, I'm pretty pissed off, right? I'm just walking home. I just went out to buy water, right? I'm literally they're asking me what's in the bottle. It's like, I just bought a bottle of water. They're asking me if I have drugs and this and that. Like, no, I don't. Obviously, they were trying to, they were trying to extort me. They were hoping I'd have some drugs or something, catch this tourist, and, we can take some of his money to not send him to prison or whatever. So that was shady. But again, it was a calm thing. It's something that, again, some people would make a huge deal about. I posted about it on social media, but it wasn't like, I want all this sympathy or whatever. It's just like, yo, this is kind of crazy. Like, look at this thing that happened. So honestly, I feel blessed that I'm wired that way. It does have some negatives, like all personality traits have pros and cons, but I think that for the most part, it's actually been a pretty important reason why I think I've been able to do what I do, how I do it, and not sort of be lying on the floor in a fetal position, crying because people said mean stuff on the internet or whatever.
Yeah, certainly. Within your personality, are there any traits that you think makes you question authority or things like that? Because you've complied there very strictly, but over the last 2 years in particular, which we're really going to dive into, you've been a very strong voice questioning and trying to seek your own truth and understand a bit more about what's actually going on. Sure. Do you have a level of like disagreeableness, or are you contrarian on a number of subjects, or has it really just been some of the things that have put forth in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I'm more disagreeable than average, but that one's not like an extreme. So maybe it's that combined with a very high assertiveness, though. So I have coming out of the personality model, just more philosophically, I respect authority that deserves respect. I don't have this thing that some people have where they believe and feel they must respect an authority just because of a person's title or whatever. Right now, we live in the age of trust the experts, follow the scientists, listen to the like just this person has been called an expert, the public health officials, whatever. I'm in better shape than all of them, right? But I'm supposed to defer to every single thing they say because they are called a public health official and I'm not. I'm not a doctor, so I can't say anything, right? To me, that's nonsense. There's tons of doctors, tons of scientists, tons of experts in all fields that I respect. But I respect because they have earned the respect. They've been trustworthy. They've shown their knowledge. They're willing to have people ask them questions. It's a very simple thing. If you call yourself an expert in something and you are not willing to have conversations, you're not willing to debate, you're not willing to even be questioned or challenged, I'm skeptical now. Okay, I wrote a book on fitness. If someone has a fitness related question and I get angry at them for even asking, how dare you ask me that? Just shut up and do it. You should be like, if you go and see your doctor, you have some issues, something you're worried about, or you go and see a dentist. I don't know, I've got something in my tooth, you know, and you have a question. Maybe they want to even prescribe something, and you want to ask. You're like, what about the side effects? Is there something else? What about this? What about that? And they're just like, look, just shut up and take this medicine. You'd be like, hey, that's not, you know, you're supposed to alleviate my fears and concerns and questions. And we've been in the 2 years literally of just shut up and do what we tell you, right? That's literally what the message is. Shut up, put on this mask, take this injection. If you even question it, you are anti-vax, you are anti-science, you want people to die. You're like, it's psychotic. It's psychotic. So it's like people in the media, politicians, these experts and so on, as they call themselves, they're now lamenting the fact that people don't trust them. It's like, well, why don't people trust you? How come people trust Joe Rogan, but they don't trust you? It's because he's being honest, right? He's willing to have conversations, be questioned, whatever. The messaging throughout this whole thing has been terrible. So I'm not someone who just like is screw authority. I'm actually not prior to the last couple of years, no one would have described me as a rebellious person. Like I follow most rules because I agree with most rules, actually. And I think that's the case. And I think this is something that perhaps has been forgotten in modern Western society, which is that it's not just the law. People don't just do things and behave how they behave because of laws and threats and coercion from the government, right? You don't not rape and murder and rob and kill people simply because it's against the law. Yes, it's against the law and it should be, but you agree with that law, right? You agree with it. You're like, no, it's wrong to do those things. It's horrible to do those things. That's awful. I don't do that. Even if that law somehow didn't exist, I imagine you wouldn't do it, right? There's things that are legal. There's things that are legal, but they're wrong. And you don't do them because they're wrong, right? It's not legality. And you can also, especially in a corrupted society or a corrupted system, you can have laws which are unjust, right? The law is saying you should or you must do something which is wrong. And actually, in my perspective, and there are people who disagree with this, but I think I have the right position. Actually, no, if tomorrow, this wouldn't happen, but if tomorrow they made a law that you, I don't know, if you see a cat in the street, you should kick it, right? That's the law. You won't do it. You're like, no, I'm not following that. That's a horrible law. That's awful, right? I'm not.
Some people might sue me because they appear to be very differential.
Some people, yes, you know what? Some people would, but I'm using this like kind of extreme example. But you can go back in history. If you want to go back in history, we can find plenty of unjust laws, which I'd argue, people should not have been following for centuries, let alone millennia. So that's kind of my view. So I don't think I think I can appear more contrarian or rebellious than I am, simply because society has become so debased in certain ways. So here's the thing, if you just stay still and the world moves, you can start to look like the outsider or the outlier or even the rebel. And the past couple of years have been a perfect example of this. So as we record this video, England is mostly back to normal. I think Scotland is getting there, but different depending on where you are in the world, you could be having a really different experience right now. Okay. And we've talked about the whole pandemic thing a lot in general on multiple podcasts, but all I've done throughout this whole period, this 2-year period, all that happened is I stayed still. Okay. So everything you see me advocate or you hear me advocate or say is what everyone agreed in January 2019. Everyone agreed with me, right? Everybody was anti-lockdown. Everybody was anti-mask. Everybody thought that medical choices should be up to you. Everybody agreed that. Everybody agreed, right? If in January 2019, I said, you shouldn't be able to go outside without the government's permission, you could get me sick if you go outside. That statement was true. You could get me sick. There were colds, there were flus. We've always had diseases, but that was the extremist position. What do you mean people shouldn't be able to go outside because they could get each other sick? That's extreme. That's extraordinary. We should lock down all these businesses. We should force people in the West Keep in mind, I grew up in the Middle East. In the West, people should be forced to cover their faces in public. Why? Because they could get each other sick. And you want to make that was extreme. And now all of a sudden, by me staying still and other people adopting these beliefs, people now, I'm now the controversial one, because I'm just saying, hey, I don't want to cover my face in public. And you certainly shouldn't have to. If you want to, okay. If you want to stay at home, okay. If you want to close your business, whatever you want to do, you want to take this, you want to take this treatment, you want to take this medicine, it's up to you. I'm a very healthy individual. I don't want to take most medicines, right? Like, I don't just go around popping pills and taking random injections. Like, that's not how I live my life, and most people don't. So I'm just kind of maintaining this position of what is reasonable and sane and fair. And to some people, because they've been struck in this fear narrative and this hysteria for so long, they actually are not able to see that they are the ones who are actually adopting extreme positions. And you're really seeing this in some countries where they're outright demonizing people and punishing people, imposing segregation, outright discrimination, firing people from jobs. Imagine, honestly, imagine, Colin, imagine in 2019, imagine suggesting that anyone who doesn't take the flu jab should be fired from their job, or shouldn't be allowed to go outside, or shouldn't be allowed in a restaurant or a cinema or a gym. What? Everybody in the country would have been like, this is absurd. Like, no, we are not doing this, right? No, you can't come over for Christmas. You're my sister, but you can't come to for Christmas unless you take your flu jab. What? So hopefully when I'm seeing this, people can see how absurd society has become. So I'm not the one who is, some type of extremist or whatever. It's just like, hey, I've just maintained the position that everyone believed in 2 years ago.
One of the big drivers of people adopting this counter position from where we were 2 years ago has been language. And as a rapper, I think you're well placed to answer this kind of question. But where we have language, it can be a very powerful tool to drive how we feel. So we had phrases like stay home, stay safe, protect the NHS, which are extremely emotive. Stay home, save lives, which was probably even more powerful than that. In recent years, we've had Make America Great Again, which was Trump's 2016, and it motivated people to get out and vote who wouldn't traditionally voted for that party. Boris Johnson had his recent landslide with Get Brexit Done, because people, even if they hadn't voted for Brexit, were just sick of the to and froing, and they were like, right, okay, well, let's vote Boris in. The northeast of England, which was traditionally redder than red, overwhelmingly voted in the Conservatives, which it would never have done if Boris hadn't been so concise in his messaging, and maybe Dominic Cummings as well. What role do you think language has played in moving people's positions so radically to something that makes you seem contrarian when you're asking to maintain levels of freedom that you previously had access to?
Wow, I think it could be the most powerful factor. It could be the most powerful factor next to fear, but the language has been used to instill the fear. I believe that fear is the most powerful human emotion. Some people disagree with me on this, but I don't actually think it's, some people are like, no, it's love. I think that fear, in terms of behavior, nothing allows you to control people like fear does. If you can scare somebody, you've got them. You've got them. Whether the fear is rational or irrational, right? I mean, there are some genuine fears that make total sense, right? If a lion jumps into the room you're in right now, you are going to have a response, and you should have a response because it's survival. But if you can instill that in someone, especially artificially, you can fill them with a sense of dread and fear and uncertainty and anxiety, man, you've got them by the proverbial balls. You can do whatever. And this is not new. Every tyrant in history has known this. Every dictator has known this. The media knows this. In the media, they say, if it bleeds, it leads. That's why there's so much fear all the time, because you can control people by making them afraid. And what you can also do is you can set their fear on a certain thing. So one of the most fascinating things to me, like the psychology of the past couple of years have been really interesting. That's why I talk about it. I'm not interested in the virus. Like, the psychology is fascinating, because you've essentially brainwashed half the world to focus entirely on one threat. One. Not even one of the major ones in terms of the grand scheme of things, okay? So a lot of people who are really on board with the narrative and who, you know, don't like people like myself who challenge and question it because they're like, you know, COVID it's deadly, it's killing people, da da da, and they'll cite numbers, okay? So let's talk numbers, okay?
I was going to talk on it, because I think the biggest challenge that somebody like you would face would be 150,000 people in the UK have died. And there was language like "stay home, don't kill your gran" and stuff like that, which was quite extreme. That was on social media. How do you retort back to that?
Very simply, you stay calm, first of all. Okay. Firstly, I would respond with, let's differentiate between from and with. So how does the NHS count deaths? 28 days within a positive test. Okay, so these are deaths with COVID or with so if you look at the numbers, I mean, this has come out quite recently. I think over the 2-year period, oh gosh, I don't want to quote the number because I'm not going to get it right, but it's something around 9,000 to 10,000 people under 60 with no existing health conditions have died from the virus, something like that. Okay, so first you have the from versus with. Okay, it's important to always contextualize numbers. So I would ask that person, okay, 150,000. What was the average age of death? In the UK, somewhere around 82. Do you know what the average life expectancy in the UK is?
It's about 81 or 82.
Yeah. Okay. So that matters because an 82-year-old dying of anything is not the same as a 25-year-old dying. And some people don't like to acknowledge this because, like, I'm 100% on board. Look, every freaking life matters, but human beings are not immortal. The older we get, the more likely we are to die. Once you're into your 80s or your 90s, or if you make it to your hundreds, you know, there's a lot of things that can kill you. Okay. So the truth is something like COVID is a finisher disease. It's not really a disease that takes a bunch of people who are perfectly healthy, you know, like myself or yourself, and it just wipes us out. There's diseases that can do that, Ebola, you know, but this is not one of them. And we've known this from very early. So the numbers need to be contextualized. So firstly, you have the from and the with, and then you have average age of death. Also comorbidities. The average number of comorbidities people are dying with it's not even just one, it's multiple. So this also matters. And then the most important framing, because most people, see, this is the power of the media. Most people have no idea how many people typically die. They don't know. Colin, in an average day, do you know how many people die in the UK every day on average?
I'm not sure, but I know that I saw a stat that in an average flu season, between 200 and 300 people die per day of the flu in the UK. And we never had any discussion of that previously. No.
Okay. So if you were to guess on an average day, like your entire life, how many people in the UK do you think die? Have a guess.
No idea. 2,000.
Pretty close. About 1,500.
Okay.
About 1,500 every day. It's been the case your entire life. About 1,500 people a day die. So when they come on the news and they say 37 people in the UK have died of COVID today, contextualize that, right? So that sounds bad. Look, again, you know, we don't. It would be lovely if we could live. Actually, it wouldn't be lovely if we could live forever, but we kind of feel it would be. So you have to contextualize all of these things, because if you don't, you know, let's talk on a global level. Okay, so people will say worldwide, people will say over 5 million people have died in the past 2 years of this. In an average year, globally, about 60 million people die. 60 million. So in the course of 5 million people, let's say 5 million people died from COVID. Let's accept that number. 120 million people died of everything else. So we're not even talking 5%. And so, and people are not even, people don't even acknowledge the other 120 million. They don't even know the number. They don't think about it. And so this is really the power of you were asking about language. This is how the media can focus the attention on one thing to the point that people don't even consider all the other things. We haven't even talked about the impact of the measures, right? The impact of the lockdowns, the impact of the stay at home, the impact of the isolation, the impact on the economy, mental health, physical health, children, pulling all these children out of school for a year, everyone covering up their faces.
And schools remain heavily disrupted by the isolation periods as well, and false positives and all the different things that come into it.
And didn't they say in the UK 700,000 missed cancer? Was it treatments or diagnoses? 700,000.
Yeah, it's incredible.
700,000. Like, this is what happens if you just tunnel vision on one thing and you don't even think about. Here's a point I've made before, and very few people have made this point. Very few people ever talk about this. To me, there was a big philosophical question that was never asked in any of these countries when this whole thing started. Okay? And that philosophical question is reducing or trying to is reducing COVID deaths, assuming that this is what people were really trying to do. And I have questions about that. But if it is that the most important thing in society? Is it more important than civil liberties, human rights, every other cause of death, the economy, the well-being of children, people's mental health, right? And so all of the things for the past 2 years have been running on the assumption that nothing, literally nothing, is more important than reducing COVID deaths. Nothing. Screw your rights, screw your freedom, screw everything that our society and civilization has been built upon. Nothing else matters more than this. And so people have implicitly been running off this assumption. And at no point did anyone ever have that conversation and go, wait, pause. Is this the most important issue? To me, the obvious answer is no. But even now, that conversation is not being had. You're seeing all these countries implementing all these increasingly crazy policies, and people are justifying it under that notion. But it's like, well, who even said that that's the most important thing that we should all care about?
One of the big accusations or sticks to beat you with in this discussion that people would have would be around perhaps your emotional detachment that you've tried to have there to have a hard, cold analysis of the figures. However, you have importantly raised other causes of death like cancer and the treatment disruption to that, but also mental health. And I saw some of the statistics you were sharing around suicides that have significantly increased during this period, and nobody can find another factor which has led to more mental health, because what else has changed apart from the fact that we've been locked inside? So mental health has, of course, been torpedoed by this. So I think you've done very well there to articulate why you're not this heartless person who just dismisses the seriousness of the pandemic, because I think that is the most common thing that gets leveled at you when somebody
it is. And there's also one thing that's important. Look, prove to me that here's one of the saddest things about all of this. People can't even prove to me that the measures work. It's not even that these are extraordinarily effective measures, right? And undisputably, like, these are very effective. We do the lockdown, the numbers all drop. We do this, and then we put the masks on, and that's not happening. In fact, there's so much counter evidence to it. You can't even show me. Nobody can even show me evidence saying, okay, prove to me that these cloth masks work. Prove it, right? You can't do it because those studies don't exist.
Do you know,
right? People never.
Interesting thing, Zuby, was at the start of the pandemic, when there was a shortage of masks, we were all briefed that masks didn't work, because I was walking around the supermarket for my 1 hour a day to get my things. Once a week, I think you were told to go to the shops. You were advised not to wear masks because we needed to prioritize the mask for the NHS, but also the mask that you would wear, it wasn't as effective. But I think the mandate came in July 2020, as soon as the supply from China picked up again. And many of the people that were making other things switched their business to make PPE. And I find that incredible that we were able to witness this change of narrative so quickly, and we were able to accept it so quickly. And I guess one of the other areas that it would be wild for us not to discuss is that when we look at how the people who were enforcing the rules with all the data, all the information, all the insight, how they themselves were behaving, if indeed they were truly terrified of the nature of this virus, would they have enjoyed the level of freedom that they did inside Downing? and I'll level with you, Zuby. I came into this period as somebody that was a lot of faith in institutions, very pro-monarchy, traditionally would have been quite comfortable with the Conservative government. But wow, my faith in institutions and their ability to serve my best interests has diminished. And I see a lot of people scrambling now to come onto the skeptical side, Zuby, and join you. Piers Morgan being one of the big ones who scared the living daylights out of people on GMTV or whatever it's called for months and months and months. But now is scrambling to be almost against it and contrarian in terms of criticizing the fact that restrictions are remaining in any shape or form. Do you feel vindicated in any way at this stage?
I do, but I don't expect anyone to say sorry. That's the truth of it. It's quite a thankless task, but I don't have an agenda. My only agenda is I just want life to be normal. I have a very simple political philosophy, if you even want to call it that, which is that peaceful people should be left alone, right? You do you, I do me. And, as long as you are not infringing upon someone's right, you're not hurting anyone, killing anyone, taking somebody's stuff, for the most part, there's always going to be exceptions. For the most part, you should just be left alone. You want to go hang out with your friends, see your family, do this, do that. Totally fine. Even if you want to wear a mask, totally fine. I've never opposed people wearing masks. I've never opposed people staying home. I've never opposed a business closing if they want. I've never opposed anyone taking a vaccine if they want to. If you want to, it's the force and the coercion and the mandates and the laws. That's what I have an issue with and always have. There's a great point you made there where you were talking about the behavior of some of the politicians and health officials, whether this is them banging their mistresses or traveling to go on holiday, in different countries as well, right? You've seen the same with American politicians, British. Look, think about it. If you had imagine a truly terrifying, deadly pandemic. Let's say something that kills 20% of people it affects. It doesn't matter their health, their age, whatever. It's wiping out children to young people. Just real horror story. Would the people in power, would they be most protected from the virus or most protected from the policies and the restrictions? Right? They've been the most protected from the policies and the restrictions. They've been insulated from that. They've been able to flout all of these rules. You can watch behavior. If you really want to know what someone believes, watch their behavior. Don't listen to what they're saying. Watch what they do, okay? If someone is saying, I'm to this, whatever, and then they're going off on jollies and they're having holidays and they're having parties, you're not afraid of a virus, mate, period. I don't care. You can put on your mask in front of the camera and, do all your stuff, but that's not how you behave, right? If I knew there was a virus floating around outside that has a 20% chance of killing me if I get it, do you think I need to be forced to stay at home? You think I need to be forced to wear a mask, assuming that the mask works? I will be first in line. I'll be the first in line for the freaking vaccine. People want to call me, Zuby's an anti-vaxxer. I'm bro, if this were the situation, if the situation were what you are imagining it to be, no one, you think you're going to have 100,000 NHS workers wanting to they'd rather be fired than take the cure. Doesn't that make someone go, wait, why are there 100,000 people who work in healthcare? They can't all be conspiracy theorists, right? They work in healthcare. Yeah. You were clapping for them.
It's right? A term that's thrown around to delegitimize their concerns.
Yes, it is. So it's look, if you had a serious, honest society, the honest question would be, why? Okay, why don't you? Let's talk to people, especially if you are somebody who's like gung-ho pro-vaccine, let's say, you should want to know, rather than just trying to demonize these people, you should want to know, okay, what is it that you're concerned about, or whatever it is. For a huge percentage of them, it's like, oh, I've already had the disease, I've already got immunity, I'm inoculated already naturally, I don't need it, right? There's no upside. Very simple. Other people, it's like, okay, I haven't had it yet, but I've been dealing with the patients for 2 years, I haven't gotten sick, I'm fine, I'm not worried about it. Cool. I'm not in the risk demographic. Other people may have concerns about the product itself, whatever, but all that it's been is just demonize, attack, attack, attack. Nobody is even trying to understand other people's positions. Like you are, but who in the media has honestly been like, okay, we've had these people we've been screaming at for being anti-vaxxers for a year. It's been 1 year now, right? We've been screaming at them. You've been trying the carrot, the stick. You've been trying to beat them into doing it, but millions of people don't want it. Okay, why don't we talk? Maybe we're going about this the wrong way. Maybe they know something we don't. Okay, why don't we talk to them? But instead, it's just demonize, censor, attack, coerce, fight, force. Like it's insane to me. It's also insane, and I'll be honest, man. Here's something that. And again, another point that very few people have made. Due to the nature of this terrible messaging and communication in multiple countries, do you know what I predict is going to happen? I think that they have created millions of new, real anti-vaxxers. People who their entire life never had a question or a qualm with vaccines as a concept and as a product. But now, because of all this attacking and name calling and demonizing, it's made them, you know how human beings are, it's made them go, okay, well, maybe like this whole thing, maybe this whole thing is a scam or is dangerous or whatever it is. Like, but by not, when you don't address people's concerns, you make their brain fill in the gaps.
The trust, right? Trust has been broken. And we will people will entrench into positions that are harder to break than ever before. And when there's no dialogue between opposing thoughts, or even just critical thought where somebody has skepticism or concerns, then yes, we end up with these more entrenched positions where people in future, God forbid, and there is every chance, I'm sure there's modeling that suggests that we will experience another pandemic at some point, whether it's in you and I's lifetime, we don't know. But if the next pandemic that comes along actually has a much higher mortality rate, that 20% you spoke about, even something as high as 5%, there would be a lot more statistical case for people to take a vaccination, but there would be a higher level of skepticism than ever before because people feel betrayed during this period over how it's actually been managed. Exactly.
So, as they've done many times, they're creating, I don't know if it's intentional or not. I think in this case, it's probably not, but they are creating the monster that they want to believe already exists, right? That's not by calling everyone who has look, there's people who have taken the jabs who are still being called anti-vaxxers because either they don't think it should be forced, or maybe they themselves personally had a bad experience. And so they're like, look, I took it, but I had a bad reaction. And this is just my honest situation. People are like, you're an anti-vaxxer, It is unhinged. It is insane. And if you keep calling people things that they're not, then you might eventually end up creating that. And also, look, we live in a free society, or we are supposed to, okay? So even if somebody is anti-vax, like truly, that's their right? That's their right. You can't force people to take medicines. Like, you may just be like, you know what? I freaking don't want to take aspirin. I'm anti-aspirin, okay? I'm not taking an aspirin, period. And someone might be like, okay, that's weird. That's strange. I don't think that's rational. Maybe you don't think it's reasonable, whatever. But they're allowed to do it. There's people who eat McDonald's every day. There's millions of people who refuse to go to the gym and exercise. To you or me, that might be bonkers, right? We're like, what do you mean you refuse to exercise? Like, that's crazy, but it's your life, man. It's a free world. I'm not going to drag you to the gym and beat you until you bench press. Like, that's not how our society works. People are allowed to have their views. You may think that they are wrong. You may think that they're incorrect, but if they are not, directly hurting somebody, that's within their right.
It's one of the strangest phenomenon of this period in the West that we've seen more draconian measures, and we've largely ignored and completely disregarded how almost the entire continent of Africa has got on during this period, which has remarkably low vaccination rates. And we talk a lot about South Africa, but other African nations are almost completely disregarded in this discussion because it maybe doesn't fit how they feel about it. I know you've looked into that, Zuby. What were some of your findings?
Yeah, sure. So you got to remember, so Africa is 54 countries. It is the poorest continent. There's a lot of people there with not great nutrition, the infrastructure, the medical treatment, the electricity, the roads, the water, all of that stuff in many of those countries is not great. So again, if you run a scenario where you have a truly deadly virus running through the world indiscriminately, right, which kills indiscriminately, of all the continents you think are going to get hit the hardest, Africa obviously would be the one, obviously. And I'll be honest, at the very beginning of this thing, that was one of my few concerns. I was like, I hope Africa is going to be okay here. My family's originally from Nigeria. I have family in Nigeria. So I was like, I don't think this thing is anywhere near as bad as they're saying, but you don't want Ebola #2 or whatever sweeping through Africa in particular, just because they don't have the resources to handle it. It quickly materialized that wasn't the case. So I have ideas here. So I haven't seen like an in-depth study of looking into all this, but there's some obvious things we know about this particular virus and the way it behaves and how it affects different people. So one obvious thing, and people don't like to talk about this one because it's the elephant in the room, obesity rate. Okay? Obesity rate. The higher the obesity rate in a country or higher obesity in an individual, much higher percentage chance that you're going to have a rough time with this particular virus if you contract it. That's just a fact. The other big one, biggest one is age. Majority of people who are dying are elderly, over the age of 60, over the age of 70, perhaps even, to be more specific. So Africa in general has a much younger population. I believe the average age in the UK, somewhere around 45. In Nigeria, it's like 20, right? So, but that's not all, because some people think it's just that simple. And it's not that simple, because there are lots of elderly people in the continent of Africa, and they've also fared pretty well compared to North America and European countries. So it's not quite that simple. So in terms of things that I am going to guess here, is this video going on YouTube?
It can do. It's up to you.
Okay, so I'm going to censor myself for YouTube. Okay, there are a couple of well-known treatments that people use as anti-parasitic and anti-malarial drugs throughout the continent of Africa, which you can get over the counter, and they're used by hundreds of millions of people, which it has been suggested. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but it's been suggested, and that those things help to act as both a prophylactic and a treatment of this particular virus. So that could be a factor. We also know in the West, most people who died with this disease were vitamin D deficient. Again, in a continent like Africa, people spend more time outside in the sunshine. Outside, that's another thing. People spend more time outdoors, right? Everyone here, people were forced inside their houses. The virus spreads indoors. The stay-at-home order probably killed more people than a nothing order, because you force people to stay inside where the virus spreads. We've known from 2020 that it spreads indoors. So the message should have been go outside, get fresh air.
Zuby,
you're not going to catch it if you're outside.
Just on vitamin D, I spoke to an expert from the University of Liverpool, John Moores, on vitamin D, largely to do from a health perspective, well beyond anything to do with the pandemic. And he said that insufficient vitamin D and deficiency, which large amounts in the UK are, particularly between September through till March, actually results in a poorer uptake of vaccination as well. So if you,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, so even having a vaccine, not specifically this one, but other vaccinations, your response to it is poorer if you're vitamin D deficient. So
That's
people
interesting.
not supplementing with that is incredible.
That's interesting. I guess it makes sense because a vaccine works based off of your immune system. So people have conveniently forgotten the immune system, and the sort of basic GCSE biology of how your immune system works. A vaccination works by triggering an immune response, the antibody response. Typically, it's an inert version of a virus, which is or a weakened form, which is put into your body, and you produce the antibodies which target it, and then it remains, and you have the B and T cells which help to fight it off in the future. So whether you get an infection or you get a vaccination, given that vitamin D supports your immune system, it actually, I'd never thought of it from what you just said, but it makes logical sense that a vitamin D deficiency would lead to a lesser immune response, whether through an infection or through a vaccination. So that's really fascinating. And see, this is the stuff that, these are the kind of things that it's like, it's sad that it's 2022 and stuff like this is, I mean, that's not even really being discussed. Like vitamin D is still, hasn't really been discussed much throughout this. Treatments.
Yeah, the government's
have you noticed that
recommended daily allowance for it as well is extremely low, whereas we know from being gym bros that it's maybe 4,000 IU up to 10,000 IU that you need to be consuming. And the government are telling you 30 grams of protein and 400 IU of vitamin D will make you a healthy guy.
Yeah, it's crazy, man, dude. It's crazy to me that anyone, there's no one who knows me personally who's like this, but when you're getting these strange people on the internet who do this whole, if you're against lockdowns or mask mandates or vax mandates, that you don't care about people or you're selfish or whatever, when it's so far removed from the truth, right? And all of the stuff I speak on, do people honestly, even people who disagree with me on stuff, do these people really think I'm saying all this? Like, I've been talking about this stuff from March 2020. You think I don't have to? I'm not paid for it. I'm saying it because like I said, I'm trying to get to the truth and make sense for myself, but also like I care. I can see things going wrong, like both through things that have been done wrong, I believe, in terms of the response to the virus, but also the downstream effects of these policies. All of a sudden, people are like, oh, where's all this inflation coming from? Oh, what happened? It's like, well, this was obvious. I was talking about this back in 2020, and people are just there calling you a grandma killer and like all of this stuff. And it's like, dude, I'm here trying to I wrote a book about health. I was talking about health way before it was cool, right? I've been an advocate for health for a long time, but health is not as simple as caring about one virus and just mask and jab, mask, jab, mask, jab. Like that's all it is. No one's talking about vitamin D. No one's talking about zinc. No one's talking about going outside and getting fresh air and the importance of seeing human faces and interacting. And no one's talking about natural immunity. No one is even talking about treatment. When people get sick and hospitalized with COVID, most people don't get treatment. Do you know that? People don't get treatment. They just leave them in the hospital. They just get put in a bed. If they get really, really bad, they get put on a ventilator. And by the time you're on a ventilator, there's about an 80% chance you're going to die. That's the actual statistic. If you go on a ventilator, 20% chance of survival. Like once you're on the ventilator, you're in serious, serious trouble. They don't even treat the patients. Like, how is this not, like, think about that. This whole 2-year period, they haven't actually really been treating patients. I've got doctors in my family. I speak to them. I'm like, okay, so if someone comes in, what drugs are they given? People are just left there to hopefully recover. They just get just basic care, but there's not, give them monoclonal antibodies or give them this or give them. I don't know exactly what all the best things for people to take are, but how,
from a reasonable point of view, you would expect there to be a triage system where this happens.
How's that not treatment? And this is not unique to the UK either. I mean, how is that not a scandal in itself? Right? Someone's mom gets hospitalized with COVID. and they're now in the hospital, and they're just, okay, we hope you get better soon. It's like, well, can you give her something? I mean, what's the point of going to the hospital if it's just, I don't know. There's so many things to me that should be gigantic scandals, and people should be. And if we had an honest media, the media would be asking these questions. The media would also be asking, hey, what's going on with Africa? How come Africa has breezed through this thing with minimal lockdowns, minimal mandates, low vaccination rates, and they honestly, like, they've dealt with this way better than we have.
Interestingly,
so
Zuby,
why?
The same people that would call this a discriminatory comment would still ask questions just like this. They maybe don't trust the data coming out of Africa, but if you were to say that about another particular topic around Africa, they would call that discriminatory because of the nature of their political bias. It's very difficult. The same people that would shout you down for one particular opinion or generalized comment would make a generalized comment that, oh, the data we're seeing from Africa is not to be taken as seriously as our data. But then we've just already highlighted some of the flaws with the data that you shared around deaths being counted as up to 28 days after a COVID positive test. So it's a very, very challenging period with information. I actually recently spoke to the UK's #1 sales trainer, Andy Bounds, and he said something that was very interesting, and it links back to our language point. Facts tell, stories sell. And stories have been massive in this period versus the facts, when you dig into them in the way that we have during this discussion, would point you to take a radically different approach, or at least have more skepticism about the path that we went down and more resistance to the extent that it's gone. But the stories that we've had around it and some of the language that has been used has really compelled people to maybe just agree with the path that we've ended up going down.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And, look, here's another thing that's been really overlooked throughout all of this. And it's another fascinating phenomenon I've noticed. I noticed it prior to any pandemic situation with the West, which is that people no longer trust their own eyes, right? Like they no longer trust their own senses. And I've asked people before, does it feel like you're living in a deadly pandemic? Does it look to you like you are living in a deadly pandemic? Right? Just your own observation, right? I mean, okay, I'll ask you a personal question, and you can answer. How many people do you know who have died of COVID?
I don't know anyone that's died
in 2 years. You don't know one. Okay, that's the answer of a lot of people. In 2 years. Now, I mean, that's good, right? But if it were what they're trying to make us believe it is, you wouldn't be able to deny it. It's the same thing that so let's say even if Africa does not have accurate data, no country has accurate data as far as I can see, but let's say that the whole continent of Africa, lots of these countries, they don't have accurate data. You wouldn't be able to hide it. If there were a killer virus, I mean, I've spoken to people in various, I have plenty of followers in that continent, and I know people there, and you can't hide you wouldn't be able to hide all the death and destruction, is what I'm saying. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to hide it. Like I was, thank God we were not around during the Black Death. I assume during the Black Death, you did not need to use the media and propaganda to convince people that there was a pandemic going on or an epidemic, right? Like you can see it. You see sick people. Everybody knows people who have at least gotten very sick, if not died. People have lost siblings. People have lost children. It's there. There's no denying it. It's just like this is here. I mean, think back to I don't know how old you are, but like when it was going around, I was young at the time, but say like the AIDS epidemic. People knew people who were dying. Like it was, and that wasn't even that. Like that's a it's an STD, so it's not transmitted the same way. But it was like it's very real. It's there, and look, like there. I'm not even going to the other extreme and saying, oh, there's no virus or something. It's like, yes, but the level, it's about proportionality. Okay, it's clearly not this thing that, oh wow, like I don't know anyone who knows a child who's died. in any country, they're running around trying, we need to vaccinate all the children, we need to do this, children are fine. That's actually one of the huge silver linings of this whole thing, is that kids have been hardly affected. Statistically, it's not even worth, it's barely like children, deaths and hospitalization.
You're meant to be a bad guy. You shouldn't be pleased about the children being okay. You're meant to be this heartless monster, aren't you?
It's so wild. But the thing is, because of the way it's been sold, I've made this point many times. This is the first virus in history where people want it to be worse than it is. People literally want this whole thing to be worse than it is. There are people who are disappointed that this new Omicron variant is less deadly than the flu, according to actual, like, the scientists, right? They said it's less deadly than the flu. There's people who are disappointed. That should be like, yes, amazing. We're done. Like, because what the real fear with this virus would have been if it somehow evolved to become
worse,
more deadly. That would have been like the true scale. Oh wow, it starts killing tons of kids. It starts taking out some of these teenagers and 20-year-olds. Like, oh crap! Like that would have been a real concern. It would have been weird because that's not normally what viruses do. But if that had happened, that would be a real concern. Instead, it was the opposite. But instead of people just being like, yes, this is good, people are so fixed on the doom and the gloom and the horror and the fear that they're almost getting this thrill out of it, where like they want, I don't think they'd ever admit it, but I see it like, man, they want it to be worse than it is. When you give people information or statistics or data or anything that suggests, you know what, we're overreacting. This is not as bad as people are saying it is, or it could be. These numbers are inflated even, right? Like that's kind of good. Like it should make you mad at the people keeping the statistics, but it's like, oh, okay, not as many people have died as we thought. I mean, dude, do you remember in 2020, beginning? Do you remember when this started? Do you remember what the projected deaths were?
Oh, it was thousands per day, because Chris Whitty came on the television and he forecast, particularly, I think it was December 2020 when it was at its scariest in terms of death predictions. But to hand, not the exact numbers, but do you have them, Zuby?
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, in the USA, it was estimated to be 3 to 4 million. In the UK, it was estimated to be, I believe, 500,000 to 1 million. So even if that 150,000 number is not accurate, but even if it were, that is like a quarter, say, of what was initially modeled and predicted. And no one wants to acknowledge that. No one wants to go, okay, actually, like I keep saying, I feel stupid having to say this because, but I know how it is with the internet. People like to twist your words, and people like to go, oh, well, you don't care about the people who die. Look, again, people do die. There's nothing any of us can do. There's no magic word we can say or policy we can do that just stops a virus from spreading. 0 people get it, 0 people get hospitalized, 0 people die. That would be lovely. We can't do that with the flu. We can't even do it with the cold, right? We can't do it. We've had flu jabs our entire life. You still can't stop people, thousands of people every year dying of the flu. So, we have to accept that is what it is. And you wanna reduce or minimize damage overall, right? Not just minimize damage from this particular virus, but overall. And you have to, through all of this, people have to maintain the things that your society is built upon. This is a point I keep hammering, like liberty is important. Civil rights are important. Equal treatment under the law is important. People actually being able to live their life and get on with each other and see their friends and see their family and pursue their life is important. People have just it's just all been forgotten. It's like, you know what, like forget all that. We're just going to spend 2 years doing all this crazy stuff. Who cares about the kids? Who cares about this? Who cares about that? Who cares about that? We're just going to focus on this thing. And I think, as you alluded to earlier, I think that now now that it's kind of trendy, you're getting more people who are like, maybe we overdid it. Maybe there's some collateral damage here. Ooh, what about mental health? Ooh, these kids aren't doing too well. Oh, what about this? What about, look at that inflation rate. Oh, everything's getting quite expensive. It's like, really? Are you surprised? Who could have predicted that? Oh, you shut down the whole economy for that long. You print a bunch of money. What's going to happen, And so I'm not going to do the whole "I told you so" thing, but it's just like a lot of this could have been avoided. I think that's one of the biggest tragedies. I don't think, the virus is going to virus. A virus is going to do what a virus is going to do. But the collateral damage from a lot of the policies and a lot of people's behavior and the media hype and the fear mongering and whatever, some people aren't totally going to recover from it. And I think that's sad because I think it was avoidable.
Zuby, you're a religious man, and what role do you think society as a whole, divorcing itself and becoming more secular from religion, has played in the last 2 years?
A serious one, a major one, man. Firstly, I think it ties into what I was just saying, of this notion that this arrogance that you can stop a coronavirus in its tracks. Like, do you know how arrogant people have to even think that's possible? We can't stop the cold. As I said, you can't stop the cold or the flu. We've never eliminated the flu. We can't. It's not, we can't do it, not with our current technology. So I think there's been a lot of playing God. There's been a lot of playing God. Like any country or place that's had this like zero COVID policy, our idea, Australia, New Zealand, like their goal was, we want to get cases to zero, and maintain it at zero. How? That's so ridiculous. It's so anti-scientific. These people are talking about science. It's like, you can't do that. Like it's not going to work. It's so arrogant to even think you can. And then, I think also the deeper thing is that we've realized how detached people have become from our own mortality, right? People have forgotten that people die. People do die. And people have become so uncomfortable with death, their own and other people's, that it's led to this mass hysteria and people even saying just some of the most absurd statements, right? So there's someone who will be triggered when I say that, most people, 90% of people who are dying are like old with lots of comorbidities. That's heartless. How dare you say that? Are you saying they don't matter? No, I'm not. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that people die. A lot of those people, even if COVID did not exist. Here's an interesting question that no one asks. No one asks this question. If COVID did not exist, how many of those 150,000 people, quote unquote, would have died anyway? Yeah, it's a significant number. I don't know exactly, but it's not zero. It's many thousands, right? Even if this virus didn't exist, because they already had kidney failure, they already had cancer, like they were already very sick. And that's sad and it's unfortunate. But look, life has 100% mortality rate. I'm gonna die. You're gonna die. We are all gonna die. Everybody listening to this is going to die. I hope you don't die soon. I hope you don't have a painful, but we're all gonna go. So do not be so afraid to live. Do not be so afraid of death that you refuse to live, and you don't live your life in a decent way. So I think that coming back around to your question, I think that people moving away from that kind of natural connection to God and life and their own mortality has made them sort of so stuck in the here and the now, that I don't know, they can't just kind of accept any level of risk or threat or whatever. Like, and then they also believe that they can play God. Man can play God. I've heard people calling the vaccines a miracle, which is kind of weird to me.
I think you make a tremendous point when it comes to people's fear of death. And I wonder how much of religion and the belief in an afterlife and a kind of a purpose to your life, but then a period in heaven or wherever afterwards, alleviates some of their fear that they need to live forever. And that you use the term risk as well. And it seems like our risk tolerance has gone to zero during this period about one particular thing. Of course, other areas, we still are willing to take a risk with our our health and our obesity levels, our susceptibility to cancer, heart attacks, all these other terrible diseases. But I think you make massive points there on the religious aspect of almost playing God and a fear of what comes next because they maybe don't believe in what comes next.
Sure, exactly. I think in general, prior to all of this anyway, I think on average, maybe this has been studied, I don't know, but anecdotally, I think that religious people are more comfortable with death, and it makes sense. Some atheists may even say that religion is used as a crutch for people to deal with pain and suffering and even death itself. And somebody may believe that. I think it's a lot deeper and more truthful than that. But I think it's a big factor. I know for me myself, like I don't want to die. I don't want to expire before my time. But I'm not particularly afraid of death. I've thought about it quite a lot. I've also witnessed it a lot. I'm from a very big family. And one of the downsides that no one talks about from having a big family is that you witness a lot of death in your life. And so I'm quite comfortable with it. It's not something that hinders me from living my life to the maximum. If anything, it motivates me. One reason why I do so much, and I'm trying to do even more, is because I know I'm going to die, right? Like I know I'm going to go. So it's like, well, let me do what I can now. Let me reach as many people as I can, help, inspire, motivate as many people as I can, have cool experiences, be kind to people. Any friend or family member, I talk to them on the phone. Before I put down the phone, I say, I love you. Do you know why I say I love you? Because one day, I'll say it for the last time. I don't know when that's going to be, but one day it will be the last time I speak to that person. And I want them to know, I love you, I appreciate you. And to me, having that sort of sense of mortality, it sounds kind of somber or morbid, but I believe it can actually, if you frame it the right way, it makes you treat people better. It makes you live your own life better. And I think it kind of alleviates this existential anxiety of, oh my gosh, like I'm just this, meat suit floating around this spinning rock, going around a fireball of gas, and when I die, that's it, and it's over, and there's nothing else. I don't know. I haven't died yet, but certainly the belief that there's something after this which is even superior and better, I think it helps to calm people and just kind of deal more in the here and now, without having this free-floating anxiety and hysteria about things which you often cannot control. You can only control things to some degree.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective, Zuby. I think it's a powerful point that many people overlooked in the last couple of years about the role that our loss of religion and our understanding of a purposeful life and an afterlife has played. And that's coming from me as somebody that's never really been a religious person.
But the thing is, people are afraid to talk about it. That's the truth, although a country like the UK has very religious roots. The UK is a Christian country. The way even lots of our laws are structured and belief systems and morality, those come from Christianity. Whether or not someone is a Christian in the here and now, that doesn't matter. Like, this is just a historical fact. Wants to be on a TV panel and talk about the religious angle of this, because they'll be, number one, they feel like, oh, not everyone believes it, so it's not relevant, or they're also afraid that people are going to mock them or say, oh, he doesn't believe in the science, he just believes in, God and Jesus, or and it's like, look, these things coexist. There's this notion that you believe in the science or you believe in God. It's like, no, it's also historically stupid, given how many scientists are religious, and how many people who have come up with some of these huge scientific concepts or whatever are believers themselves. But yeah, I think our society's too uncomfortable with that. And I think with all of these things, as this is kind of rounding out the conversation, you have to look at these things from different angles. People have been so focused on medicine, science. Right? Like I said, what about philosophy? What about the philosophical angle? What about the religious angle and the spiritual angle? What about the relationship angle? What about the societal and cultural angle? Like all of these things, they all should be factored in. Some things you can kind of just measure, and you can have stats and you can have data, but you need to contextualize everything. So things need to have a meaning. They need to have a purpose. You need to contextualize stuff. If you just get information with no context, then it's not useful, right? Think of listening to a language that you do not understand. You're getting information, you're hearing it, it means nothing. It's just data. But it's like I can't even process this data because I don't understand this language, right? So if you're just flooding people with information and it's like, well, there's no context, there's no way to frame it. It's like, well, what does this mean? Like, what does it mean? How am I supposed to process this? What am I supposed to do with it? Am I just supposed to be scared? Maybe that's the goal, just be scared, right? It's like, okay, I'm now scared, great. But now, and then once you're feared, people can just string you along and control you. As we said before, it's like, okay, you're afraid of this thing. So every time we want to control you, we're going to invoke this fear in you. And then people can just pull you along like a puppet.
Yeah, Zuby, I think you've wrapped up things nicely there in terms of speaking about the contextualization, which is something that we strive to do throughout this discussion, where you gave facts, figures, a raw analysis of what's been going on during this period, as well as a really interesting insight into what makes you the forthright speaker and commentator that you've become during this period. But of course, it was the years beforehand, that time under tension, those reps under the bar that you did well in advance. For people that want to continue the conversation, Zuby, where should they head towards?
Sure thing. So you can find me on all social media at Zuby Music. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, minds.com, all of them at Zuby Music. If you want to check out my music or my podcast, you can just go on Spotify, iTunes, whatever you use. Just search my name, Zuby. You'll find my music there. You can find my podcast. It's called Real Talk with Zuby. But if you just search Zuby, Z-U-B-Y, on anything, you will find me.
Thank you very much, Zuby. And thank you to you, the listener. That has been a challenging and interesting conversation for me to really explore and navigate with Zuby. And I'm sure you all enjoyed it as well. If you did, please take a screenshot and pop it in your Instagram story. And I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.